Yaxchilan. Located deep in the jungle on the border between Mexico and Guatemala. People told me to be careful here. They told me to be prepared for anything. They told me to be prepared. And I was ready for anything. Dengue fever. Smugglers. Wild animals. But there was one thing I wasn't prepared for. Okay, I'm in what they call the Labyrinth. And I don't have a light. Alright, but let's back up a bit. I've been studying the ancient Mayan writing system. And while it's fascinating to read about these hieroglyphs in books, I wanted to see them for myself. So I went to the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. This is one of the largest museums in Mexico, and it's dedicated to the ancient civilizations of Mexico, such as the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Zapotecs, the Toltecs, and others. And of course they have a great hall dedicated to the Maya. Here there are great works of art, including replicas of temples, ceramic artwork, copies of murals and paintings, ceramic vessels and pottery, statues and figurines, urns and monuments. And they even have a section dedicated to Maya writing, including a sample of hieroglyphs made of stucco, a replica of a Maya book, examples of writing tools, and more. This collection also houses various examples of Mayan writing, and some of the finest that were found in Mexico. This includes the stone lintels of Yaxchilan. These large, heavy stones would have rested atop doorways in the city of Yaxchilan. Most of them were carved in the 8th century, some 13,000 years ago. They're exceptionally well preserved due to the quality of the stone, and their text and artwork documents the lives of the rulers of Yaxchilan, important events in the city's history. I read that there were many lintels still in the jungle in the ancient city of Yaxchilan, so I decided to go there. But it wasn't easy. That's because Yaxchilan is here, located in Mexico's southeastern jungle frontier in the state of Chiapas, on the border with Guatemala. This border is formed by the Usumacinta River, which snakes its way through the jungles to the lowlands, and was one of the most important waterways in the ancient world of the Maya. If you look at the site of Yaxchilan on a map, you'll see that it's located at a bend in this river, and there are still, to this day, no roads that go there. That means the only way to go there is along the river. It takes about an hour by boat to the nearest town, Frontera Corozal. And Frontera Corozal is some 3 hours by car away from the nearest major city, Palenque, which is itself kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like many places in Mexico, the Usumacinta River has a name in Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. Osoma or Usuma means monkey. Tzin means the revered one or the small one. And Tlan means the place where there are many. So it means the place of many small or revered monkeys. Not only are there many monkeys, there are also crocodiles, and snakes and tarantulas, and at least in the old times, even sharks. This gave the river its Mayan name, Xocolha, which means the waters of sharks. Besides the wild animals and tropical diseases, people have been fighting over the Usumacinta River as an economic corridor for thousands of years. In 2023, Yaxchilan and Frontera Corozal were closed to outsiders because of the security risks posed by smugglers seeking to take control of the region. It reopened again in 2024, and a few months later, I went there. Now let's get back to the Labyrinth. Welcome to Yaxchilan. Before I could even start filming, I heard a strange sound above me, and I thought it was some kind of bird. But there's actually about 4 monkeys over there in the trees. And they're spider monkeys. They're whistling at me. And one was growling. And I just noticed that this is a giant pyramid behind me. It's not been excavated. Okay. Welcome to Yaxchilan. As I said, I'm on the border between Mexico and Guatemala, on the Mexican side, deep in the jungle. This is probably the deepest jungle that you have in Mexico. Near here is the Lacandon Nature Reserve, which is reserved for the Lacandon Maya people who live a very traditional way of life out in the forest. And they have a large area of forest set aside so they can do that. This site is only accessible by boat, and it's in the middle of the jungle. I'm a bit in shock. This is really deep, deep jungle. Here's a map of the site of Yaxchilan. It should be noted that Yaxchilan, which means the green stones, is a modern name. Epigraphers have been able to decipher the old glyph for Yaxchilan, and they believe it would have been pronounced as Patchan, the place of the cleft sky. It's a very large site, but due to the rough nature of the terrain, only a small part has been excavated, and much of it hasn't even been surveyed. Besides being surrounded on 3 sides by the river, it's also built on top of rough mountainous terrain, making it very defensible, probably why it was settled in the first place. I only had 2 hours there, so I didn't get to see all of the site, but let's take a look at some interesting buildings. Okay, to pass these bats. Okay, I'm in what they call the Labyrinth, and I don't have a light. Uh-oh, I don't think that's the right way to go. Okay, this is oh wow, that's a hornet's nest. Okay, but they built their nest on this hieroglyphic inscription. I don't want to get near them. Maybe we'll skip this one. There are lots of what they call palace-style rooms around here. These would have been the palaces of the kings and queens of Yaxchilan. Here's a look from the other side. Very, very thick walls. Oh. These are buildings 23 and 24 of Yaxchilan. This building used to house 3 very important pieces of artwork in the Maya world. This building was the palace of a woman named Ix K'ab'al Xoc, Lady Sharkfin. She was an important member of the ruling dynasty of Yaxchilan, and she was an important leader in her day. The first lintel of her palace is one of the most famous images from the ancient Maya world. It shows Lady Xoc piercing her tongue with a barbed vine. This was part of a bloodletting ritual that was practiced by ancient Maya elite. On the next lintel, we see Lady Xoc interacting with a vision serpent, implying that she's hallucinating. The person in the mouth of this vision serpent is called Ix K'ab'al Xoc. He's a god, particularly of war. So she seems to be consulting with him, probably about a battle. These lintels were taken away by a British archaeologist in the 19th century by the name of Alfred Maudsley, and the first two can be seen in the British Museum in London. In the third panel, we see Lady Xoc with her husband, Usumacinta River. She's handing him a costume of a jaguar and helping him prepare for war. The third one, however, is in Mexico, and I showed it earlier in this video. It's at the National Museum of Anthropology. Here we have the other side of that inscription. This is obviously the original has been removed here. The stone looks much too clean, or maybe it's just been cleaned actually. Cleaned or restored, it's hard to say. There's quite some intense weathering, so I'm inclined to believe that it was just cleaned. All right, looks like I'm going to be sweating a lot. I'm wearing long pants because I'm afraid of snakes. And maybe they won't bite me if I have long pants on. There's a lot of stairs in this city, they say. Some very tall pyramids. Let's see what's at the top of this one. It looks like part of the staircase has collapsed from trees growing on it. Well, I made it to the top, I would be saying, if I had made it to the top. Well, I made it to the top of this secondary side structure halfway up the pyramid. Wow. This place really feels like nobody's been here for hundreds of years, even though that's not true. Here's an altar. There's a room of some kind of stone plaque in the back. Well, the bats here are very large. Okay, now I'm really at the top. This is the Grand Acropolis that has a height of about 60 meters. And on top, this massive temple that's covered in seated figures. And it has 3 doorways adorned with lintels and a beautiful statue inside. In front of it, we have the stalactite. This stalactite was taken from a cave and is symbolic of the underworld, the world of the ancestors and the world of the dead. And it's carved. I don't know if you can see. There's some hieroglyphic inscriptions on it. It's also useful as a sundial, depending on the time of the year. You can see that it's casting a shadow in a certain way. Up above it, we have some figures. I believe these are of kings. Yaxchilan is very much centered on the monarchy here and the dynasty that ruled here for 400 years over the course of 19 kings. And almost all of the monuments are dedicated to their accomplishments. Alushas. Here we can see a collection of artwork from around the city, much of it related to the royal ball game, which was played by the ruling dynasty. You can see the ball pretty clearly, as well as the elaborate costumes that they would have worn during the game. This temple is one of the largest and most impressive in all of Yaxchilan. This building was built by one of the great builders of Yaxchilan, named Yashun Balam IV. He was the son of Itzamna Balam III, although he wasn't the son of Lady Xoc, by one of his other wives. It's dedicated to the maize god. His statue is inside the central room, although his head is now decapitated and lying to the side. This was done sometime in the modern era, probably out of superstition. Here we have an altar stone, badly worn, but these would have been used for offerings, burnt offerings. If you would come here and worship the maize god whose statue is inside, or to pay respect to the city and the ruling dynasty, and you wanted to burn an offering, you would do it on top of a stone like this. There's several of them. There's also 2 more over there. Yaxchilan is a classic Maya city. I mean that in terms of the fact that it was during the classic period, it was really started to grow around the 400s and crashed sometime around 850. After 850, there was no more writing. There's little evidence of habitation. And like many other Mayan sites in the southern lowlands, it seems that at that point, they suffered a great crisis here, and the city was depopulated forever. So it was a classic era city. About the time, it was blooming about the time that the Roman Empire collapsed. What was the Dark Ages in Europe? But I don't mean that it's a classic site in the temporal sense, even though it is from the classic era. I mean it's a typical Maya site. It's what people imagine when they imagine a Maya site. It's a bunch of pyramids covered in hieroglyphs and decorations, deep in the jungle, ruled by an ancient dynasty of kings who traded and fought with all the others around them. And even though it's so deep in the jungle and the climate here is so extreme, it's been quite well preserved. A lot of information has been preserved from here, and the reason for that is that they like to record things on lintels, on the underside of door frames. And that protects them from the elements better than any other position, being exposed to the air and the water. So on these beautiful door frames, we have all kinds of information about the royal dynasty and how long they ruled, who they went to war with, but they especially loved going to war with Piedras Negras, which is another ancient site on the Usumacinta River. And they were at war with them for hundreds of years. Okay, let's see what's up here. Okay, up here we have a pyramid. No surprise there. On the pyramid we have another one of these lintels. Oops, I was looking at it backwards. This depicts the king bird jaguar IV performing some of his royal duties, meeting with ministers. Every 20 years, the Maya completed a cycle of time that was very important to them. And when this happened, they often built great buildings because it was considered to be sort of the renewal of all life, of all time and space, and the functioning of the universe. So it was a big event. And every 20 years is pretty often. So I'm on top of a giant pyramid and has a square built on top with many of these buildings. Some of them look to be residential in nature. They may have been palaces. There were 19 kings in the dynasty here. 19 rulers. I think one of them may have been a woman. And they all had their own palace. Sometimes they would reuse a palace, but often they would have one built, sometimes on top of an older palace of one of their ancestors. So you end up with these massive structures with kind of irregular shapes, because it's a pyramid built up. How do I get down here? Whoop. It's a pyramid built up on top of buildings. And it just takes the shape of whatever was underneath it, but a bit wider and taller. And up it goes. I need to get back to the river in half an hour. I'm not sure where I'm going exactly. Let me check my compass. I think I'm going the right way. Whoa. This is a strange building. I don't know what this is. Also, maybe a house? Oh no, this looks like it may be a steam bath. There were several steam baths here. One is near the ball court. Steam makes one ritually cleansed, ritually clean. So it's important for various ceremonies, including the ball game, which was actually a very important ritual, and not just a game. So eventually, when all these buildings are built up and up and up, it creates something like this. This is called an acropolis. An acropolis is just the result of these small buildings being built up over time. And at some point, they start growing together and becoming a huge platform, and they take on a new life, a new meaning, and become something bigger than the sum of its parts. It's also thought that this might have been built in such a way as to be a defensive structure. Many palaces were meant to fend off attackers, especially in a place like this, where they were constantly at war with other cities. So that would be a palace, but also sort of a castle for the ruling elite. It is on top of a hill as well, which I have to go down now. I hope this is the right way. It's definitely a long way down to the river, where any attackers would potentially come from. I think it would be hard to sneak up here. Yet it seems they did. Well, this really goes a long way down. Hope this is the right way. Where they could, the Maya took advantage of the natural landscape and hills to do things like make more impressive pyramids, acropolises, fortifications. And here, when it's so overgrown, and it's hard to tell what's a pyramid and what's not, on this hilly landscape, you get the impression that everything's just one massive pyramid. Even though Yaxchilan was a great military power, great trading power, and they captured many other cities, it seems that at some point they were captured themselves, because there's a few kings somewhere in the middle of the dynasty who didn't really create or write much. Probably because they were under the control of another king from another city. I've been going down for at least 10 minutes. Behind me is the Usumacinta River. I'm on the Mexican side, and on the other side, that's Guatemala. Unfortunately, one of the most interesting aspects of the history here and the architectural achievements of Yaxchilan is not visible, at least not now. It's the middle of the rainy season, it's very hot and humid, the river is filled with water, and for that reason you can't see what's at the bottom of it. But during the dry season, you can see that in the middle of that river there are two piles of rocks. And not only that, next to those two piles of rocks, there's an embankment on that side and on this side, artificially built. And the way that they're lined up seems to suggest that at some point there was a suspension bridge here. And that would have been not only one of the oldest, if not possibly the oldest suspension bridge in the world, stone suspension bridge especially, it may have also been the longest bridge in the world for hundreds of years, at least until it collapsed. Over there you can see some of the embankment. It's of course buried in trees and plants right now. Oh, mosquito. It's of course covered in trees and plants right now, so it's difficult to make it out. But there is a stone structure under there, and it lines up to one on the other side. Here's a reconstruction so that you can see what that would have looked like. Quite impressive, especially when all the trees would have been cut down. Walking into the city, it would have controlled access to the upper level of the city. Probably there was some sort of drawbridge aspect to it, guards on either side, and it would have served as a defensive structure. Also one of the most amazing technological engineering achievements of the Maya. All right, that's it for a pyramid review from Yaxchilan. I'm going to sit here on the riverbank and try to dry out my sweat-soaked clothing while I wait for my boat to arrive, which I think just did. As always, thank you to my patrons, and if you'd like to see more ancient history, as always, thank you to my patrons, and if you'd like to see more tours of ancient sites, please subscribe.